so much for joining us today. This is our first of what we hope is of many to come to talk to Annie Gunning, our certified child life specialist, just about how just to get some insight into her expertise and to disseminate that information more freely to our community members. So Annie, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to kind of start this, what we're doing, like little series. I think it'll be just some quick tips to help people. Just in the moment or as things come up.
That's kind of the goal is we know that everyone it's first of all, it's summertime now. So a lot of kids are home as we're experiencing.
Right.
And there's just a lot going on. So our goal is to try and just give really wonderful pieces of advice related to your expertise and your profession, just in like quick, manageable pieces.
Yeah.
So whether that's going to be like once a month or maybe once every other month, we're still going to figure out the cadence of it, but I think it's going to be really helpful for everyone. So today we're going to talk about how to prep a child or a sibling for an upcoming test, procedure, or surgery, which is huge. But before we do that, just in case there are people new to Hope for HAE, or if there are people who've been here a long time but still don't really know about you, Annie, or what a child life specialist does, do you mind kind of explaining or recapping that for us?
Yeah, absolutely. Child life specialist. I'm a certified child life specialist, and our goal is to help patients, children, families cope with stressful experiences in life. Typically, those revolve around medical procedures in the hospital setting, but we're also expanding out into the community as well. So how can we support those families that aren't directly in the healthcare system or in the hospital? What else can we do to support them? So by supporting them and helping them cope, this is providing education on whatever procedure, surgery, test, or diagnosis they have, discussing a coping plan, providing opportunities for creative expression that might involve doing also some medical play, and incorporating the education with medical play. So those are really the main ways we focus on helping children and families cope with different medical procedures, surgeries, and things like that. I'm also a certified grief counselor. So that was just something additional that I recently got, because another thing child life specialists do is we provide support at end of life or bereavement and grief. So I decided just that would be helpful for me, especially being in the community.
And we're going to go into the first question, which is the most obvious one, of course. How do you start to prep? Let's start with your child. How do you start to prep your child for a test or procedure or surgery? I know there are probably many steps and facets to this answer.
Yes, definitely there is. And when I will provide information, and it's just general developmental levels, your child best. So again, this is going to be general, and then you adapt it and, adjust it based on your child's specific needs. So these are like guidelines that I like to use and provide. But the first thing I think about is their developmental age. For the toddler preschool age, if that's the developmental age, you can start prepping and talking about the test maybe a day ahead of time. You don't want to do it too far ahead of time. For school age kids, you can do a couple days. So 2 to 4 days, 3 days. And then when you get with it just kind of keeps getting longer. So with the older kids, middle school, teen, it can be several days to a week. Again, you just adjust to what your child's needs are. And I actually had a little girl that I was working with who was 9, and we were trying to work on a coping plan for her for some procedures she was going to have. And she specifically said she wanted to know the morning of, not right before the test, not the day before, but the morning of. So that was enough time for her. So, like I said, that's just kind of an example of, your child best.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing you want to consider. Another thing that I always talk about with kids when I'm preparing them or talking to their parents is sensory experiences. What are they going to see, hear, taste, feel, smell? Think about the test and what is that going to encompass? So is there going to be a lot of bright lights? You think of OR and hospitals in general, it's typically really bright. But specifically in the OR, there's bright sunshine lights is what I call them. Or is there going to be a medicine that they have to drink? And is it going to taste really gross? Is there going to be a poke? And is that going to hurt? Is there going to be just a blood pressure and an arm squeeze? So all those different things you have to take into account when you're preparing kids. So is it going to be a loud noise from the machine? And then we can put the earplugs in, things like that. So
things like that, you don't really maybe think about until you have a child who really struggles with sensory stuff too. Like my daughter she was 25 minutes late to soccer camp this morning because she didn't like the feel of her socks. And we had to calm her down and get her out the door, and so prepping, having those conversations, I've learned just in my experience with her for something that is trivial and something that isn't as important as a hospital visit, has been so helpful just to like prep and like alleviate the anxiety to know what to expect. It creates a roadmap, I think, for these kids. So
definitely. And then, like you said, that's specific for your child. So that's the area maybe you focus on more. The other things don't bother them as much. So, and I think you can adjust too. Like I've done when we've had kids, when I worked in an emergency department, I would take extra things out of those rooms that we didn't need because it's just overwhelming. Hospitals are very overwhelming. Yeah. So like there was just things I'm like, let's move these things out of the room. We don't need them. So that's just something you can always kind of consider and ask about as well.
Awesome. So far we've talked about like provide enough processing time, dependent on their developmental age, processing or explaining like the sensory experience. What are some other things we can do to prep a child before their visit?
Yeah, I think when you're first talking to them and going to bring up the conversation, you have to have an MRI. Do you know what an MRI is? Or the doctor said, you're going to have a spinal fusion. Tell me what you know about that. So putting it on them and asking them, what do they know? That gives you a good jumping off point and a place to start. Okay, they know an MRI is a test with a camera and it's loud. If those are the things they've mentioned, then you can kind of go from there. So just asking them first to get their feedback and then building upon that is typically helpful. And then we can go into more of like, so once they do that, then what do we do? What other information we provide? One thing I do want to mention as well is when you're going through just discussions in general, whether it be a test or procedure or a diagnosis or anything like that, if a child at some point changes topic, changes the subject, walks off, wants to go play, that's their sign to you and their signal that they need to stop and they need to pause. And you can acknowledge that and validate that, like, hey, it looks like you need to go play for a little bit. This is still important that we need to talk about, but we're going to take a break and we'll talk about it later. So, and that's just their processing. They just need to process what you've told them. And then you can come back with that conversation again, at a later, whether it be a couple hours or that evening or whatever.
Yeah. So just honoring their reaction.
Absolutely.
And validating whatever it is that they're experiencing or feeling. Yeah.
Yes.
Very smart.
Absolutely.
Very smart.
And after you talk about like, this is what you're going to experience and this is what the test is, now we need to come up with a coping plan. Like, what are we going to do now to make this go well? Like all of this is part of coping, right? Educating them and providing those opportunities to learn what it is. But what can we do to help during or when we're on our way there, when we first get there? I like to always prepare kids and I'm talking to them like, first, we're going to do this. Next, we're doing this. And then this happens. So just that sequential order of events. We're going to go to the hospital. We're going to check in. They're going to give me a bracelet with my name on it that tells me, tells people how old I am. And then next we will, the tech or, the hospital worker will walk us to the room and they're going to do my blood pressure. They're going to do my weight and see how tall I am, like vitals, if that's what it is, like whatever it is, but this is what's next. Then we're going to go into another room and like if they have to change their clothes into a gown or something, then you're going to change. So just providing that order of events. And again, with older kids, you might be like, hey, we got to go check in. And you can be more general and vague. And then they'll ask more information seeking, whatever they need to know more to help them prepare. But the younger kids, you can just provide first this, next this, then this. just think of the order of specific things, just so they're kind of prepared on what's coming.
Yeah. And I mean, and that's something I never really thought of either. Just even explaining, especially to younger children, like you're going to go into a room and they're going to have you change out of your clothes and into a gown. Like those are just things that, you know, maybe when you're older and you experienced it, it's just part of your script. It's just part of your experience. But for a kid who's never done that before, it's important to know and to go over so they're not surprised.
Yeah. And that might be weird for them. They're like, a gown? What's a gown?
Right.
You know, and then that's another, like, and I've done that. I'm like, it's hospital pajamas. They're kind of silly. It looks like we're all wearing a dress, but it's important that you wear these so, you know, the camera can still take pictures.
Yeah. And you end up paying for those fuzzy socks, so you might as well take them home.
Right. Most kids really like those for some reason. Can I take these home? Because they're like,
I have like 4 pairs. I never throw away my hospital socks. I'm like, if I paid $50 for these, they're coming home.
Right. Coming home. For sure.
Now,
so that's part of like the coping, the sequential kind of the steps. And then another part is, well, I think I might have backtracked a little bit, but what do we do like when we get there? What's going to help us in the moment, in the procedure before? So do you need to take I Spy books for a distraction and an alternate focus? Is there music or movie? I feel like those are kind of the easy ones, like have an iPad to watch a movie. But comfort positions is a great one. Like if there's going to be a blood draw or something, can the child sit like chest to chest with you? Do you need to lay down on the exam table with them? There's different positions you can do. Do they need to stay in their stroller? Is that very comforting to them with a blanket? You know, bringing a lovey, or older kids, headphones and music on their phone. Like those are all things that help them cope. And then role playing that, like as you're explaining everything, let's get the doll, and the doll has to have an MRI. Maybe the doll lays under a table, or you lay under the table with the doll, and we practice laying really still and really, you know, we're really brave, and you kind of role play that with the child, or they do it with their doll or stuffed animal or something, you know, that they love, to kind of practice those things.
Yeah. Wonderful. So just comfort position, talking about what makes your child feel calm, and like what positions they can like be in with you for some of those more scary parts. Distraction techniques, I heard you say. So these are all really smart coping strategies. Yeah. And I, as a former teacher and also just now as a mom, like I'm always surprised to know like how much my kid knows about herself, you know? So like asking them like, what makes you feel calm? They might come up with something really insightful that you maybe didn't know too. Right.
And I can just briefly to share, there is a parent in the Hope community that I did like a one-on-one session with. Her daughter was going to be getting like monthly infusions that were going to be several hours, and this was going to be new. She knew this was going to be difficult. So we kind of talked about what could help that. And one of her daughter's things that was very comforting to her was her daughter had like a wagon that she loved. And I was like, take the wagon with you. If that's calming to her, you know, as someone who worked in an infusion center too, whatever parents would bring in or would help them, like I'm open to it. You can always ask them beforehand, hey, this is her safe place. This is where she feels comfortable. Can we do this? And then she sent me a picture of her and her wagon. They had it all covered up and she was doing beautifully. So, you know, if there's things like that that your child finds very comforting, you can always be like, you know, talk ahead of time. Hey, is this possible? Can she just sit in this instead of the chair or the bed that you all have? Because it's definitely, you know, an option. And then I also had her kind of gather together a bag of things that she would only use during infusions. So that way each month, these are like new toys again, or she only plays with them then. So different distraction items based on that child's sensory needs. And so mom keeps that and they just go with her to infusion.
And your experience, hospitals were receptive to a lot of that happening, like a kid bringing in their own stuff and materials?
Yes. I mean, and again, I would talk with them before and just, I feel like space is always an issue because that was the mom was like, I don't know if there's space. I'm like, just, you can ask them. Like if they say, hey, that's not possible, we can try X, Y, Z instead. But again, like as somebody, I worked in infusion, and if I had a family call, I loved knowing information ahead of time about the child, what would help them. Like if it's going to make it less stressful for them and make the experience, you know, better and increase like positive coping, all for it, you know, like,
Okay.
why not try?
Okay. Do you feel comfortable about the advice you've given about prepping the child? Or do you have anything else you want to add before moving on to the sibling?
I think so. I think that's, you know,
Okay.
pretty the basic gist of it. And I know there's going to be you're going to have some follow-up stuff
Yeah.
that's just going to be available too. And of course, families can always reach out to me anytime. And if they have specific questions.
All right, perfect. So we know that this type of medical experience, whatever it may be for your family, it doesn't just affect one person, it affects everybody. And that siblings are just as an important part of this equation as the child or patient, him or herself. So I guess my question is, do we spend time preparing a sibling or prepping a sibling for this experience? And if that is important, how do we do it?
The simple answer is yes, absolutely include the sibling and prep them too. Definitely. Like you said, they're part of the family too. They're going through experiences of their own as well related to this. So I think you can follow the same general developmental guidelines as far as time frame of prepping them, and also include them in, hey, it's especially if it's going to be like an overnight stay or, you know, a surgery that's going to be a few nights or a week or whatever it is. Hey, we're going to be going in the hospital. Can you help, you know, Timmy pack his bag? You know, some toys that he really likes, or you know, his favorite book. Just include them so they feel like they're, you know, they have a part too, and what their role is as a sibling is important. So can you pick out the pajamas that they should wear? You know, just including them. And I think sometimes providing those like connection activities for families too while they're gone can be helpful. I've done with kids, they draw on pillowcases with fabric markers, and then the mom can take that with them, and vice versa. Like you can each draw one and then kind of trade. So you have those pillowcases that the other has drawn, and siblings too. They draw one or draw a picture of their room. And, you know, of course, the obvious FaceTime calls and things like that. We've done a lot of like connection bracelets. So mom has and the sibling at the hospital have the same bracelet as the sibling at home. So you just kind of know, hey, even though mom's here, we're still always connected, even if we're not in the same space. So definitely including them. And then as far as prepping them for the procedure or test, you can, you know, do it in the same way as just starting that conversation with them. And a lot of hospitals have great, their website might have little cartoon videos of CT, MRI, OR that walks you through it, or it might at least have someone typically from Child Life talking through the procedure as well. So there's different, you know, websites. You can always try the hospital website, but Kids Health has great videos on it as well. And then there's an app that I use a lot called Simply Sane, and that has pictures and sounds. And sometimes just using stuff like that can help show the sibling what, you know, their brother or sister is going to be doing and what it's like to see those pictures.
Okay. So accessing hospital resources and other things like kidshealth.org, which I heard you say, and the Simply Sane app, which we'll make sure we put on our blog and our key takeaways so everyone can see what those are. Providing siblings with opportunities to help, maybe like packing, you said, their go bag, or drawing a picture, or providing some type of like calming tool that they know their sibling would like. And then finding times to connect, or just connection or bonding activities with the parents while they're gone. And then something I know that you and I talked in our preliminary discussion as well was just kind of like a timeline, or like what to expect of like who's going to pick them up, and like who's going to make dinner, right? Stuff like that.
Yes, definitely. That I think is really key to a lot of siblings, because if mom or dad or both are going to be gone, who's going to be making me dinner? Who do I still get to go to, like Girl Scouts, or do I still get to go to soccer practice? Who's taking me and picking me up? Because sometimes kids have a real fear that they won't be taken care of. So just kind of making sure that they know somebody will, and who is that person? You know, kind of pointing that out is definitely helpful for those kids, and just them feeling, you know, calm, and help them cope too.
Yeah. And I know there are so many unknowns, and so many things could happen. So it might be hard. Maybe, you know, some families might say, we don't have the answer to these questions yet. We don't know. But even I think saying that might be helpful. Just saying, we don't know yet, but we will know by this time, you know. I think just establishing those expectations is helpful too.
Yes,
Awesome.
I'm glad you said that, because that's something I actually meant to bring up in the prepping. When if kids, especially older kids,
Mhm.
ask a specific question, it's okay to say, hey, you know what, that's a great question. I don't know that, but let's write that down in a book, or let's put that in our
Mm,
phone. So then when we get to the hospital, we can be sure to ask someone on the
yeah.
healthcare team that question. So yeah, definitely it's okay to say, I don't know the answer to that. I'm glad you
And
reminded me
that's, oh yeah, well, just you did that. Good job.
of that.
Um, so I think that's a great segue into the last part of this, which is, what are some of those extra resources or tools or pieces of advice that you have? I know that you mentioned, like, again, the kidshealth.org, simply saying, or simply even like logging onto the hospital to see if they have like videos to show of the procedure, developmentally appropriate, of course. Um, but that even, we can extend this question even to go more of like, are there books? Are there just pieces of advice you have for parents? What would you like for them to take away from this in terms of like where they can go to for extra help?
Yeah, there definitely are. I feel like the more I kind of look into just like community resources. And again, if you are looking for something specific and you can't find it, please reach out to me. I am happy to share all the information I have. It's hard to share everything, in one segment, but
Yeah.
there's definitely books for all ages. There's a couple, I can just Needles and Noodles, like just basic Curious Storage goes to the hospital. These are all for like younger kids, a big
Mm.
operation, the Richard Scary. So there's a book list, and I don't know, maybe Deanna, we can put that on there if, or
Yeah.
something like that. And then as far as other like websites and
Mhm.
just other community resources and stuff like that, sometimes I even go to YouTube and we'll type in like YouTube, like child life, MRI. I know I keep using MRI for an example, but I feel like it's just an easy
It's a
one
good
for me.
example. Yeah.
And then a lot of times you can find a video on there that a child life specialist or, a child life department, or even our governing governing body has done to provide that information. So in their good videos. So even if you'd probably want to look at it first as a parent to make sure it's, good information and appropriate age level, but YouTube is even a good one to use for just videos to get that basic information. And then yes, Kids Health, Simply Sane are the ones that I use a lot. Kids Health I really like because they have a parent section, a teen, and a kid. So it's definitely divided up into different developmental levels and has pictures and videos and all of that as well.
And I know that you mentioned before that like it's because a lot of this focus has really been prepping for the child or sibling, but is there any advice you'd give to parents? Because they're really the ones kind of helping to facilitate this process too. Like what's like a piece of advice or just like something encouraging you would say to them just to let them know that what they're doing is okay.
Yeah, definitely. Any decision, I always tell parents, like any decision you're making, because we all question, I feel like as parents, did we say the right thing? Did we do the right thing?
Yeah.
But you're making a decision and giving them information based like from your heart that you think is going to help them. So if your decisions are, as long as your decisions are from there, which they are as a parent, you want to do the very best you can for your child. So
Yeah.
you're giving them the best information you can in that moment. That's going to be helpful. Even if you give them just a little bit of information and you don't know all of it, that's okay. You're helping them with something. And 9 times out of 10, the thing that helps kids most in the hospital is having a parent or a caregiver that they're close to, a loved one near them.
Yeah.
So just being there and providing your normal, like comforting songs, holding their hand, giving them hugs, that's, one of the most helpful things that kids, have shared that they want in the hospital or any, any kind of stressful situation.
Yeah, just being their advocate and like I know because you were telling me even before, like it's as a parent or as a caregiver or whatever role you're playing in this situation for that child, like you have a right. You have a right to know what's going on and understand what's happening and why it's happening. So like don't be afraid to ask the healthcare team questions and
definitely,
because that's always my biggest fear is like, am I bothering them? I don't want to be obnoxious, but at the same time, like your mama bear comes out and you're like, no, what are you doing? So
right.
it's
Absolutely.
Okay.
And that's your job as a parent, right?
Yeah.
You're there to advocate. And I can go back to that mom from the Hope community that I talked to. And she was just like, really, I can say that? I can ask that? I'm like, absolutely, you can
Mhm.
ask that. She's like, I didn't think that I could bring that, or I couldn't do that. I'm like, you can always ask them and then share, like, this is how my child copes best. These are things that help them. I want to try this for them. If it doesn't work or we need to adjust and change, we can, but I really think this is what's going to help them. So absolutely always advocating and asking questions. You need to know what's going on so you can help your
Yeah.
child understand what's going on. You can
Yeah.
ask a million questions. You need to, and you're allowed to. Absolutely.
I love it. Well, I feel really good about this. I think this is going to be so helpful for so many people because, I mean, even yesterday, I got an email from a mom whose kid is just unexpectedly got admitted to the, PICU.
Mm.
So it's just, this happens. And anyway, like with your expertise and with your support, we just love you. We love you so much. Um, just to help our community members get through some of these moments. In just like in using like medical play and creative expression, and all of your advice is just so wonderful. So thanks for taking the time to do this for
Absolutely.
us.
Absolutely.
Um,
My pleasure. I love doing it.
and just so everyone knows, like we'll post this on YouTube. I'll create key takeaways. We'll write a blog. We'll disseminate that on our social channels and on our website. But just another plug-in for visit HIE.support, because that's how you can get in touch with Annie, right? And you can request her services or just even sending her an email. All of that
Mhm.
information is on HIE.support. So that's just our comprehensive support network. And we really encourage you to go take a look and just see what we have available for you guys. But in the meantime, use this as a resource, and then we'll get together and we'll figure out what we want to talk to you next about. And hopefully
Yeah.
we can get some community feedback for our part 2 child
Yeah.
life specialist series.
Yeah,
um,
definitely.
I love it. Thank you so much. And if there's any other questions that the community members forgot to ask, just reach out to Annie, reach out to me. I'll get you in touch with her. And thanks again, Annie, and we'll see you soon.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you. Bye.